Hey there, and welcome to Common Knowledge. Today, I wanted to take a look at one of my favorite Magic the Gathering sets of all time and talk about it in the context of one of my favorite Magic the Gathering formats of all time, which is, well, Pauper for the format and Portal 3 Kingdoms for the set. Portal 3 Kingdoms is a really weird set. It's not one that was published in America when it first came out. It's a starter set, the portal part, there are 3 portal sets, and each of those sets were really meant to be kind of entry points into the game for different people. And they're a little odd. They don't have instant spells, instant speed spells. Everything's played at sorcery speed, although there are some cards that can be played. They're sorceries, but they are played at instant speed. And in fact, I believe they've been eroded into instants at this point, which is very silly. But I wanted to take a look at this set because it's not a set really known for its power level. It's really known more for, oh, these cards are all really expensive because they're hard to come by. But I think there's some cool stuff in this set, and I'm a huge fan of the Three Kingdoms era. I played Dynasty Warriors as a kid, and I've read the books, and just a big fan of these larger-than-life mythical kind of characters, even though they are based on real people. Romance of the Three Kingdoms is a fictional novel, but it's historical fiction. These people actually lived around, but they didn't necessarily do all the crazy cool stuff that is mentioned in the books. Anyway, I'm going to take a look at 9 cards here today and just kind of talk about where they could go in Pauper if you wanted to play them, some that are actually even played in Pauper currently, which is pretty cool, and maybe me telling a couple stories from Romance of the Three Kingdoms, because that's just what I like to do. Let's get some cards that are, let's get the cheating ones out first. I'm going to start with a little card that you're probably familiar with. It's called Stone Rain. The Stone Rain is 2 and a red for a sorcery, and it says destroy target land. Okay, this one's a little unfair because it's Stone Rain. You've seen Stone Rain before. It's been in the game from Alpha. So it's not a Portal 3 Kingdoms card, but it does have a Portal 3 Kingdoms printing. And that printing is, I believe, one of the most expensive ones. It's not too bad. It's $5.29 here. So not terrible. But when you can get a Mercadian Mass version for 26 cents or something, you tend to go for the cheaper ones there. Stone Rain is played in Pauper in a couple of different kinds of decks, mostly Gruul decks. You get the Gruul Ramp decks that'll sometimes play it. More often than not, though, you're going to see it in the Gruul Panza. Apparently, it's even played a little bit in Green-White Bogles, Selesnya Bogles. I have to imagine that's just like some sideboard piece that can potentially get rid of a problematic land. I don't know. MTG decks had it listed, and I still don't really believe it. But it's Stone Rain. It's a classic card, and it does have a Portal 3 Kingdoms edition, and that's fun, but it's Stone Rain. That's Portal 3 Kingdoms cannot claim that card. Next up is a card that Portal 3 Kingdoms can claim, but has shown up in some sets after that. In fact, some relatively recent sets. This is Corrupt Court Official. 1 and a black for a 1/1 human advisor, and when this creature enters, target opponent discards a card. So originally from Portal 3 Kingdoms, that version is definitely the most expensive at $17.71. It's also an uncommon in Portal 3 Kingdoms. So this wasn't Pauper legal, and then it became Pauper legal with Streets of New Capenna when it got reprinted, and then it got reprinted again just somewhat recently in Avatar: The Last Airbender. So this card has made a comeback, and it's pretty good. We've seen cards like this do well in Pauper. We've seen cards like Virus Beetle show up. People tend to play the Virus Beetle more often than they would the Corrupt Court Official because that is an artifact creature, and you get the benefits of having artifacts. Where you're going to kind of see a card like this be played is in those Orzhov Blade decks. It's cheap enough that you can bounce it back to your hand and then play it again. But again, that's a reason why you play the Virus Beetle instead of the Corrupt Court Official. Being an artifact, your Glint Hawks are able to bring that back to your hand where they wouldn't be able to get your Corrupt Court Official back. It's still okay. It's also been a little power crept by a Duskmourn card. No, not Duskmourn, Lost Caverns Vixalon card, which when it comes down, Skullcap Snail, I believe. I've put it on the screen here at this point. And that card will exile a card from your opponent's hand, which is certainly better than them discarding it. Almost 100% of the time, I believe. But hey, Corrupt Court Official is still good. It's still a fine card. It's still something that is pretty dirty to blink and bounce when you can, even if cards like Refurbished Familiar and Virus Beetle and even Skullcap Snail have all eclipsed it. Still not a bad card, something you might want to consider. Maybe you have a deck that cares more about humans than it does about artifacts, and Corrupt Court Official might slot in at some point. Okay, this is I guess it's not really our last cheaty card. This is Strategic Planning. It's 1 and a blue for a sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Good card. Just seems like a good card, right? Being able to look at 3 and take 1 and the others go in your graveyard, and it's blue. What are we thinking for this one? I could totally see this going in Mono Blue Terror. In fact, it has shown up a little bit in Mono Blue Terror. It's not a staple card in that deck by any means. And certainly the Portal 3 Kingdoms version is not the the one to get if you are trying to play on a budget. Because one, again, this is an uncommon version of this card in Portal 3 Kingdoms. This is the first printing of it in Portal 3 Kingdoms. But it also has shown up in a lot of other sets here. Commander 2013, Hour of Devastation, where it got downshifted to common. We've seen Commander Legends, Kaldheim. Like it has shown up in a number of places, and in fact, it's also been part of the Strixhaven Mystical Archive. That's the first Mystical Archive, not the Secrets of Strixhaven Mystical Archive. And all of those versions are way cheaper. The Portal 3 Kingdoms version is a little less than $19 right now, which is much cheaper, or which is much more expensive than, the 14-cent Kaldheim version or the 8-cent list printing. Still, I think this is an interesting card to keep an eye on for Mono Blue Terror. I think the Mono Blue Terror deck is pretty well set right now, but if the Pauper format panel ever wanted to knock down Mono Blue Terror a peg, and I don't think it would be the worst thing if somebody tried, if you hit something like Mental Note, which is a card I've argued should be banned, not really because it's all that powerful, but because it's weirdly expensive. It's only had, 1 or 2 printing. I think it has a list printing, but it's an expensive card. And so to be able to ban that out of the format, and then other people would have to find other cards that do something similar. And I think Strategic Planning would be a good one of, hey, this isn't as good as Brainstorm. This isn't as good as, Preordain. This isn't good as Mental Note, but it's a solid card. And if the possible choices that you had to pick from got a little smaller, then I think Strategic Planning could potentially go into a Mono Blue Terror deck just fine. Puts a card in your hand, it gives you card selection that way. Puts 3 cards in the graveyard, 2 from the spell, and then the spell card itself going into the graveyard. That's potentially getting you to that Tolarian Terror. And unlike some of those other ones like Thought Scour or Mental Note that are milling those cards directly into your graveyard, you get to look at all 3 of them. So if one of those is the Terror, you can grab that, put it in your hand, and then put the instants and sorceries into the graveyard. I like it. I think it's a cool card. Yes, it's at sorcery speed because all the Portal 3 Kingdoms cards are at sorcery speed. But I think you're getting a pretty good trade-off for your 2 mana here. I think it's pretty solid. Next is a card you've definitely seen played, but maybe not the Portal 3 Kingdoms version. This is 3 visits, 1 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. Doesn't come onto the battlefield tapped, so that's a really nice one. You've seen this in Commander games for countless years, I imagine. We've seen it actually be upshifted. This was originally a common card in Portal 3 Kingdoms, and now it's been upshifted to common, but it's been in all sorts of Commander sets. Probably not as many as it should, but it's still an expensive card regardless. The cheapest copy that I can see here is a Commander Legends printing that's $6.50. That's still, kind of expensive, especially for Pauper cards. But the Portal 3 Kingdoms version is $80.98. which is wild. I do have a copy of this card, but it's the Japanese printing. The Japanese printings of these Portal 3 Kingdoms cards are generally cheaper because they're more plentiful in Japanese than they are in English. There are English versions of them, but those didn't come here. They went to other nations that spoke English or read English, and some of them have seeped back into the States. 3 visits, this could certainly go into Gruul ramp decks. It is a good rampy card. This is a way of getting dual type lands. If you have a forest mountain out there, you can go grab that like Wooded Ridgeline. There you go. You can grab your Wooded Ridgeline, put it directly into play. There's good reasons, I think, to play this card. Is it better than lots of the other rampant growth style things that you could play? Probably not. You should play that Studious First Year instead of 3 visits. I'd say most of the time, just because of the repeatability of something like that. If you're able to blink it or bounce it or reanimate it in some way, all sorts of reasons you might play the Studious First Year over 3 visits. But 3 visits is a classic, right? I don't know. You'll probably still keep the copies that you have for your commander decks, but this is a good card. Also, just the 3 visit story is one of the better stories, I think, from Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The idea that Liu Bei from the Shu army had to come to Zhuge Liang, who's supposed to be this incredible strategic mind, but he's also this hermit who doesn't really want to be found. And so he comes and he begs him for help, and he's not there. I don't know, you'll have to come back later. So he comes back later, and it's, a good climb to get to his place, and it's a very remote area. So to make this trek to come back. Okay, I've come back again. Like, is he here? Can I talk to him? Nope, still not here. Sorry, you gotta come back again. And it's on the 3rd time where Zhuge Liang finally is like, okay, hey, obviously you've proven yourself that this is something you really want, and I'm willing to meet with you now. And then they align, and Zhuge Liang becomes an incredible strategist for the Shu army, which definitely turns the tide of the war for quite a long time. Great card, fun story. I love 3 visits, and it's so funny to see the new versions of 3 visits without that scene taking place. Because what are they talking about with 3 visits? Like their copies with fairies on them, or I guess the Doctor Who version has 3 of the Doctors on it, which is, I suppose that's a scene from somewhere in Doctor Who, much earlier than the Doctor Who I've seen. So funny how they've kind of recontextualized that story. But I will always remember it as the, that's Zhuge Liang and Liu Bei. Okay. This is one of my favorite Portal 3 Kingdoms cards. I play it in a couple of commander decks. It's not that good, and it's also probably not all that good in Pauper, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. Again, another one of my favorite Romance of the Three Kingdoms stories, and it's Borrowing 100,000 Arrows. For 2 and a blue, you get a sorcery that says draw a card for each tapped creature target opponent controls, which does bum me out because the original printing of the card, which is in Portal 3 Kingdoms, says for each tapped creature your opponent has in play, you draw a card, which sounds different. Those are kind of 2 different things, because if you're playing a commander match, you'd think, oh, I have 3 opponents, so I get to draw a card for every tapped creature that all my opponents control. And no, they've eroded it to say you have to pick a target opponent. So you only get to pick one opponent's tapped creatures, and then you draw cards for all of those, which still can be really good. If your opponents in a commander game are playing a ton of tokens or something, or have gone really wide and they've swung out, you can draw a ton of cards with this. And honestly, you can do the same thing in a Pauper game. Imagine playing against White Weenie. They're certainly playing a ton of cards. They've got a bunch of creatures, and they're swinging in with all of them. Does it suck to play 3 mana at sorcery speed on your turn because it's sorcery speed, to draw a bunch of cards that then you don't have the mana to really play that turn? Yeah. And that's why this isn't really the best. But I do love this card, and it can draw you a ton of cards, and that's always something to be excited about. This is another good story, too. This is before the Battle of Chibi, or Red Cliffs, it's also called. But the idea is that Shu and Wu, so the 3 kingdoms, I guess I should have mentioned that, Wu, Shu, and Wei. Wei are kind of like the big bad guys. They've got the biggest army. Shu are the good guys, I suppose. There's some not so good guys in the Shu army, but that's the army that the story is really about. That, how are these guys who have the virtuous Liu Bei as their leader? How are they going to overcome this big Wei force? And then you have Wu, who I think are just kind of the cool guys. I think most of the Wu guys are pretty sweet, save for one, which is Zhou Yu. And Zhou Yu and Zhuge Liang from the Shu army and Zhou Yu from the Wu army, they're trying to kind of align at this point to go, oh, hey, we need to join our forces because Cao Cao, who's the leader of the Wei army, he is just going to crush either of us individually. So what can we do to team up? And as they're teaming up, they're still kind of trying to one-up each other a little bit. Zhuge Liang is being a weird old hermit guy who's like, oh yeah, I'll take care of all the arrows. I'll get you 100,000 of them. And Zhou Yu's like, whoa, that's impossible. There's no way you could make 100,000 arrows for us within a night, which is what he is claiming. And all right, I'll call your bluff. If you can't get me these 100,000 arrows, then I can't remember what the punishment was. I don't think it was we'll kill you, but it was something like, on my honor, I will get you 100,000 arrows. And so Zhou Yu's like, there's no way. There's no way he can get out of this one. And so at night, Zhuge Liang takes these boats out to this foggy water, which is around where Red Cliffs are. And the Wei army has all these boats and all these arrow guys that are just stationed there ready for whoever shows up. And Zhuge Liang has put these straw men on the boats. You can even see it in the art here. So these kind of straw guys, scarecrow kind of things that are shaped into the form of guys, and they're put on these boats. And he just drifts these boats by. The Wei army sees them through the fog. Can't really get a good look at them because it's so foggy. So they're like, I don't know, screw it. Let's just shoot a bunch of arrows into them. And all the arrows go into the boats and into the straw men, and they get stuck there. That's how arrows work, especially when you're put into straw guys. And so he makes a couple passes. The Wei army shoots all these arrows into the boats, and then he just collects the boats and brings them back and pulls out all the arrows and goes, hey, found 100,000 arrows. I guess we can use these. And Zhou Yu's like, I can't believe it. He used lateral thinking on us. How dare he? Just a fun moment of, in the book, it's really, I don't know how he's going to get out of this one either. There's no way. They even kind of calculate, I think he could make like, I don't know, 1,000, a couple thousand arrows in a night. There's just not enough resources, not enough manpower. How could he possibly do it? And he just figures it out and gets Cao Cao and Wei to do it for him. Great story. And I love this card, and I love telling that story when I get to play this card in Commander games, but I don't really play this in Pauper, and it probably doesn't have any sort of place in Pauper, but I like to imagine that it might. Let's talk about a card that I think could potentially be played in Pauper, although I don't believe it does from everything that I've looked at, and that's Broken Dam. Single blue mana for a sorcery, tap 1 or 2 target creatures without horsemanship. Not very many creatures have horsemanship. Only creatures from Portal 3 Kingdoms do, and only a small handful of them do. We'll talk about horsemanship a little bit later, so don't worry about that. Basically, we're just saying you can tap 1 or 2 target creatures. Now, at sorcery speed, that's not amazing. We'd love to have that at instant speed, so you can stop an opponent's attack step from happening, or stop a couple of their creatures from attacking on an attack step. At sorcery speed, not nearly as good, but I do like that for 1 mana, you can tap down 2 creatures. That's kind of above rate for most of the things that we can get for this kind of tapping ability. I don't mind it. It potentially opens the way for you to swing in with a big army of guys. Tap down 2 of their biggest creatures before you do. Interesting. Kind of interesting. For all the reasons I mentioned, it's probably not really a Pauper staple. The sorcery speed really does kill it. But I still think there's something kind of interesting about it. And does seem like it is a pretty good rate. It'd be a much better rate if it would cantrip and you could draw a card as well, but then it might be too good. Next card here, Riding Red Hair. 2 and a white for a sorcery. Target creature gets +3/+3 and gains horsemanship until end of turn. So now we can talk about horsemanship. Horsemanship means it can't be blocked except by creatures with horsemanship. The idea here is that Portal 3 Kingdoms, based on a novel that is based on historical fact, you're not going to have a bunch of things that are flying around. You don't have big birds that are flying through the air. So when you're making a Magic set that's just a bunch of guys, some of which are on horses and some are not, but you don't have anything that flies that way, you can't really put in one of your main Magic mechanics, which is flying. So instead, they tried to just recreate flying and call it horsemanship instead. And this is what we have. So the horsemanship only shows up in Portal 3 Kingdoms and then a couple of cameo places. I think it's in one of the Doctor Who Commander decks, because he was riding a horse at one point, so they gave a horsemanship thing there. And we've seen reprints from this set, specifically things like Sun-Chan, who gives all of your creatures horsemanship. That's a big commander finisher sometimes, if you've ever seen that one get played. If you watch the Game Nights one, Post Malone played that one and swung in, everything had horsemanship, and he just murdered everybody. So Riding Red Hair it's not exactly a combat trick, because again, it's a sorcery. You could potentially get blown out from this in the same way of you trying to cast an aura, which would also happen at sorcery speed. If your opponent kills the creature before you're able to actually get the effect on it, well, then you lost. You lost the card, you lost the effect, and you lost the creature that you were going to put it on in the first place. So that's not great, but when it does work, your creature gets +3/+3. It's fine stats. For three mana, you'd probably want it to do a little bit more, but it does give the creature horsemanship. So today, no other creatures have horsemanship in the format that are getting played anyway. So this is functionally just making your creature unblockable for a turn. And that can be kind of useful. Imagine putting this onto a Leonardo Big Brother that you snuck in the turn before. So you snuck in the turn before, it got to swing in. Now it gets to swing in again, but you got even more guys, but they have blockers now. So what can you do? If you play Riding Red Hair, he gets another +3/+3, and now he's functionally unblockable. Seems pretty good to me as a kind of finisher in a deck like that. I understand that the sorcery speed probably does kill it, but I don't know. Seems all right. I also love this art here. This is depicting Guan Yu, who is a big high-ranking general in the Shu army. He's kind of viewed as a god these days in China. He's got a huge statue, like a statue that is so incredibly tall and big and heavy that it was crushing the land. Like the land that it was on was actually buckling under the weight, so they had to move the statue to a new place with a stronger foundation. It's a huge. You have to go and find a photo of that statue. It's incredible. But Guan Yu actually got this horse. Red Hair is a famous horse in the Three Kingdoms, in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It belonged to another legendary warrior named Lu Bu, who you'd probably know if you've played the Dynasty Warriors games. He is one of the early big bads in those games, and then once he's taken care of, handled at some point, his horse is still this kind of famous trophy, the fastest horse in the land, and Guan Yu ends up with it at one point. So that is what this is depicting. It's like one of the greatest fighters on one of the greatest horses, and it's awesome. It's just awesome. And it's pretty cool that you can give one of your creatures unblockable and they can just swing in with a bunch of extra power. Not a bad card. I think you could potentially see this as like a one of maybe in a white weenie deck or something white that maybe even goes tall, something that splashes white and is able to go tall, just as a way of getting in for that critical amount of damage you need to finish the game. All right, let's talk about two final cards here. One of them actually does get played in Pauper, probably the best version of a card that we can show here because it's originally from Portal 3 Kingdoms and it 100% gets played in Pauper. And then the other one is a card that I play in a Pauper deck that nobody else really does, but I think there's a good reason to play it. So let's first talk about the card that is actually played in Pauper, and that is Peach Garden Oath. For a single white mana, it's a sorcery that says you gain 2 life for each creature you control. This has shown up in a number of sideboards for white weenie decks, those mono white weenie decks. They're obviously going wide. You have a ton of creatures, and for a single mana, you can gain 10, 12, 15, or not 15, it has to be even numbers. You can gain a ton of life off of this. And if you're playing the mono white Salt Road Pack Beast deck that plays a bunch of Ornithopters and Phyrexian Walkers, those are all spit out on the table, and then you can play something like this and you just gain a ton of life. It's a really good card. It's a really good card. And you will see it show up in sideboards because it can kind of devastate some of those mono red decks that seem to be just owning the format right now with all of their burn. This is a great way of gaining potentially 20 plus life and getting out of reach of those decks. So you do see this. I wouldn't say it's a super popular card, but it's one that you shouldn't be surprised to see. Somewhat recently at the what is this, in Canada in this month, May of 2026, it top 4'd a 19-player tournament, which isn't 19 players is not huge, but top 4ing is still pretty good. And this white weenie deck made by Rocky K ended up using 2 copies of this in the sideboard. So pretty cool. I like this card quite a bit. I've always liked this card. This was also in 8th edition, which, if you want a copy, you should probably go for the 8th edition copy because that's 32 cents. If you want the black border foil version in 8th edition, that's a whole $2.54, which does seem like too much for a common card. But it's still way better than the Portal 3 Kingdoms version, which is $24.74. So I would probably suggest just grabbing the 8th edition. Interestingly, though, the 8th edition and the Portal 3 Kingdoms ones are both uncommon. It wasn't until the online-only Masters Edition 3 set that it got downshifted to common. So you can use this. Don't worry that they're all silver set symbols. This is totally Pauper legal and a really solid card. The best card we've seen today, if you're going to play one card in your Pauper decks that is from Portal 3 Kingdoms, this is probably the one. But there's one more card I want to talk about, and it's one of my favorite cards, and that is Woo Scout. For 1 and a blue, you get a 1/1 human soldier scout with horsemanship, which means, again, it can't be blocked except by creatures with horsemanship. And when this creature enters, you look at target opponent's hand. So most of the cards that have horsemanship in Portal 3 Kingdoms are pretty overcosted. You feel like you're spending a lot of mana on creatures that are like 1/2, 2/2. It's a little bit ridiculous. And for the most part, you go, it's not worth having a creature that's unblockable, functionally unblockable, to spend this much mana on this. It's too easy for them to get popped by, a lightning bolt or a shock or something like that, electrickery. Woo Scout is also still probably a little too expensive at 2 mana. But a 2 mana unblockable 1/1, if it was just that, I wouldn't mention it. It's not a big deal. In fact, there kind of are other cards like this. I think Way has... it might be Way Scout, I think, is actually just a 2 mana with horsemanship. 2 mana 1/1 with horsemanship. That's all it is. But Woo Scout has a little bit extra here of when this enters, you look at target opponent's hand. So it's kind of like a Glasses of Urza effect. Only happens once, unless you blink it or bounce it, I suppose. But it is some information for you. It does actually scout for you. And then it just does function as an unblockable creature after that. And the deck that I put this in is Caw Gates in an Azorius Gates deck. I think this actually works pretty well because it's already an unblockable creature. You don't have to worry about giving it some other form of unblockability or trample or anything like that. You can just use your Basilisk Gate and make this thing's stats 9-9, 10-10, something like that, and just swing in with, with impunity. Pretty solid sounding to me. But also, because you're in Azorius, you are playing counterspells in that deck. You are playing a number of different kinds of counter magic in that deck. And so to know what's in your opponent's hand is actually pretty useful information. I think that's not bad to just set up relatively early in the game and know what your opponent is playing, know like what spells you might need to counter, be able to build your game plan from there. And then in the mid and late game, you have enough of your gates that you load this guy up and you swing in for big damage. I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, the question is kind of where does it go? What does it replace in the Cawgates deck? And that's a tough call. I don't think it replaces the Sacred Cat, because that's a 1-mana spell, and it has lifelink, and lifelink's really good. I don't think it replaces the Outlaw Medic, because again, that also has lifelink. It's a good blocker as a 1/3, and if they do kill it, you draw a card from the Outlaw Medic, and you don't get that from the Woo Scout. The card I ended up replacing it with, and this is going to sound wrong, and it is wrong. Don't worry, I know it's wrong. But the card I've replaced it with is the Squadron Hawk, the Caw in Cawgates. I've taken out the Caw, and I think because I do that because I think it serves a similar function. Squadron Hawk is something that gets you something when it enters the battlefield, and then it's a flying creature, so it has some sort of evasion that you can then load it up with the gates. And in a similar way, Woo Scout has an enter the battlefield trigger, and then has some evasion that allows you to swing in with your gates. So I think they have similar functions. The difference is when you're playing Brainstorms and you're playing Lorien Revealeds, things with island cycling, other ways of shuffling your own deck, Squadron Hawk is really good to be able to do that combo of playing the Squadron Hawk, grabbing 3 other copies of the Squadron Hawk, well, at least 2 other copies of the Squadron Hawk, playing a Brainstorm, putting those copies of Squadron Hawk back on top of your library, and then finding a way to shuffle those away, either through island cycling or, any sort of way of shuffling your deck. And so it's card advantage that you get to keep the best cards you want from Brainstorm and then shuffle away those extra Squadron Hawks to be able to grab them on another turn when you play another Squadron Hawk. Squadron Hawk is better. Don't get me wrong. I know that you would be downgrading your deck to play Woo Scout instead of Squadron Hawk, but I like Woo Scout, and it's a cool card, and I think it does work in certain situations. So it's a card I will continue to champion, and who knows, maybe there will be a spot that opens up in Cawgates at some point. Maybe something eats a ban, maybe something falls out of favor, who knows. But if that ever happens, maybe take a look at Woo Scout. It's a cool card. And this is a cool set. There's not a ton of amazing cards in here, as you've seen. Even the cards I showed you here, for the most part, have giant caveats attached to them. I have found places to play them in Commander where something like Horsemanship can be useful. They're pretty narrow. And there's also no multicolored cards here. These are all single colors, which can be hard to try to play them in Commander games as well. There's lots of legendary creatures in here. Very few of them are Commander worthy. I do have a Lu Shun Commander deck, the mono blue one, that's kind of cool. I do kind of like that deck. But from a Pauper perspective, not a whole lot here, but probably a little bit more than you thought. And that's what this was all about. So thanks for joining me. I will probably do this for other sets. They're especially like really maligned sets. I think it would be fun to go down some of the worst sets in history, like Homelands, and see if there's stuff. I know I mentioned a Homelands card on one of the recent and or about to come out editions of Common Knowledge, the Rating Pauper cards that I normally do. So go check that out. It's Serrated Arrows, by the way. Serrated Arrows showed up, and I got to tell the Serrated Arrows story and talk about Homelands a little bit. So let me know if you like this. Do you want to see other sets? What other sets would you be interested in seeing me talk about the Pauper viability of some malign set or a good set? I don't mind. I can take a look at whatever you want. That's it. Thanks for joining me on this one. We will see you another time when I do these. Until then, have fun playing Pauper. See you later.